Let's dive straight into this absolutely bizarre, slightly torturous behavioral experiment that, frankly, is going to completely change how you view your own self-control. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're dismantling everything you thought you knew about mental fortitude. We've got some incredibly fascinating material to unpack, and we're going to walk step by step through one of the most uniquely frustrating experiments ever designed.
So, you've got to ask yourself, is your willpower actually real, or is it just a total illusion? Look, if you've ever beaten yourself up for doom scrolling when you should be working, or if you felt guilty for giving in to a late-night snack and breaking your new diet, you absolutely need to see what this study reveals. We always tell ourselves, if I just tried harder, or if I had a stronger mind, I'd succeed. But is that actually true? Or have we just been playing a game where the rules were completely rigged against us from the start?
We are going to totally deconstruct this myth of the weak mind using a ridiculous, almost game show style experiment where participants literally ended up begging for mercy from sealed snacks. I mean, just look at this actual quote from one of the participants. "My willpower is currently on strike." It perfectly captures the absolute mental breakdown we're about to explore. We're going to see exactly how normal people react when their limits are pushed to the absolute brink, and more importantly, exactly why they break.
Okay, Section 1. Thorny path in transparent temptation. Let's look at how they set this trap up. So the researchers armed themselves with a really quirky inventory. The absolute cornerstone of this torture was a transparent, waterproof bag. They used it to make sure that tempting treats, whether it was spicy snacks or chocolate, were constantly, agonizingly visible. Just imagine having your biggest craving literally inches from your face, locked inside a clear bag you're strictly forbidden to open, all while you're wearing a foldable sun visor with a wet tissue randomly stuck to your forehead. It's just delightfully diabolical.
Moving on to Section 2, a 4-stage rigorous control experiment. Watch how this escalates.
The whole gauntlet is broken down into 4 incredibly specific stages. First, you've got transparent endurance, which is basically just forcing them to stare at the snacks. Second, resisting habit while enduring physical discomfort. Third, piling on intense mental stress. And finally, reluctant action, where they're forced to do something physically absurd and mentally draining with the very object that's tempting them.
Let's break down those early stages, because it gets rough. Imagine the sensory overload of keeping one of your hands completely submerged in freezing ice water for a full minute. And while you're dealing with that physical pain, you have to use your other hand to rhythmically fold and unfold a sun visor every 30 seconds. The whole goal here is to break your natural habits. You instantly want to yank your hand out of the cold, but you can't. You want to tear open the bag of snacks, but you can't. It's just pure instinctual suppression.
And then they ramp up the psychological strain. In Stage 3, participants are forced to listen to this incredibly annoying melody on repeat. And while that's blasting in their ears, they have to literally count the individual snacks inside the transparent bag. Oh, and right when they're the most distracted, the examiner just casually drops, "Hey, want to open the bag?" Finally, in Stage 4, they have to balance that bag of snacks right on top of their sun visor for 3 whole minutes. If it falls, they have to start all over.
Section 3. Participants' bizarre reactions. As you might guess, things went completely off the rails.
Putting everyday people through this meticulously crafted nightmare led to an absolute meltdown. And this matrix brilliantly illustrates the breakdown over time. Just watch how the impulse of hedonist type goes from simply shaking the pack in the first 3 minutes, to constantly swallowing saliva, to almost eating the plastic, and finally just bursting into laughter declaring, "I'll just eat it." Meanwhile, the avoider type literally tries to hide by crouching down and just completely throws in the towel by minute 7. It really highlights how our default coping mechanisms completely short-circuit under this layered stress.
And the specific things people were saying? Pure gold. Some folks cracked incredibly early, getting into intense, literal staring contests with a sealed bag of chocolate. I mean, when you're deprived of normal sensory input and just bombarded with all these annoyances, your brain actually starts personifying the temptation. The snacks weren't just sitting there anymore. To these people, the chocolate was actively mocking them.
Others experienced complete sensory confusion. This is wild. One participant sincerely asked the examiner, "Are you sure the cold water isn't transmitting the spicy flavor?" Their brain was under so much stress from plunging their hand into ice water while staring at spicy chips that their neural pathways basically just crossed. They genuinely thought they were tasting the spice through their freezing fingers. No way, right? The rapid-fire chaos really peaked during the audio torture phase. Some contestants completely lost their grip on the instructions. Instead of fighting the annoying music, they started rhythmically dancing to it while violently shaking the snack bag.
Others just bypassed their hands entirely and were literally trying to bite through the plastic waterproof pack like wild animals. That civilized veneer just vanished. Then, when their self-control completely faded, the mental gymnastics kicked in hard. Participants started trying to convince themselves the treats were just fake paper props. They'd say things like, well, if I open this, it's just a piece of paper, so this is just a test. It's such a fascinating defense mechanism. If you can't resist the object, your brain literally tries to convince you the object isn't even real, just to save your ego from the sting of failure.
Section 4. The real reason for winning or losing. Okay, here is the big reveal.
The researchers found something huge. The people who actually survived this 12-minute madness without breaking the rules, they did not possess better willpower. We fundamentally need to redefine what that word means, because the experiment proves that what we call success in resisting temptation is vastly more about biology and environment than sheer moral fortitude. Willpower is an illusion. We treat it like a muscle that some people are just morally better at flexing, but that's a total myth.
So we really need to stop blaming our weak minds. When we fail a diet or break a good habit, we instantly think, ugh, my willpower is so weak. But the reality is that those who failed this experiment were simply battling unfavorable biological or environmental conditions at that exact moment. They weren't weak, they were just playing on a much, much steeper incline than the people who won.
Let's look at the actual biological advantages that rigged the game here. Genetic quirks gave certain players a massive head start. For example, if you have a natural vascular tolerance for freezing water, Stage 2 was a total breeze for you. If your sensory processing makes you immune to annoying background noise, Stage 3 didn't drain your brain. And hey, if you eat extremely spicy food every single day, a bag of spicy chips isn't even a temptation. You just don't care. That is not willpower. That's literally just biology.
And furthermore, environmental factors were massive predictors of success. If the examiner giving the instructions was friendly and supportive, the failure rate plummeted. But if they were strict, people cracked way faster. Even your biological clock mattered. If a morning person took the test late at night, their failure rate skyrocketed, simply because their cognitive reserves were naturally depleted. That's chronotype alignment, not a lack of internal drive.
So the core finding of all this source material fundamentally shifts our perspective. Change the conditions, and you completely change the winners. If you just slightly alter the music volume, turn up the water temperature a couple of degrees, or shift the time of day the test is taken, the winners and losers entirely flip. The person who looked like an absolute hero of self-control yesterday becomes the person frantically biting a plastic bag today.
So, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. If simply changing the temperature and the music changes the winner, why are you being so hard on yourself? Next time you struggle with a habit, ask yourself this question and see how you can fix your environment instead of endlessly punishing your willpower. Change the game and you might just find you're a winner too. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.